Okay, here we go. This seems to be a total fail. Okay, hi, this is John Reed. I am streaming live, but not on every platform because I'm still having some issues with Twitter, who's trying to exact a pound of flesh for me to stream live. So, anyhow, this is pretty impromptu, so I'm not sure how this is going to go as far as usually I have some audience and guest participation, but I got out of my dental appointment early and I just had to do this. I've been doing some shows on generative AI and creativity, and I think they've overall gone pretty well. Had some really smart guests who brought some really important stuff to the table, and now I need to kind of break it down into some kind of a writing scenario and kind of summarize for you what I've learned. But anyhow, um, sorry, I'm distracted by all the notifications I'm getting right now. So anyhow, like I think it was really productive, but there's been an important article that's come out since that time. So I really need to get into this particular article and why it matters to the debate. And I kind of want to get back to the issue around why I was wrong around creativity and jobs. Because I think that's at the heart of this new article as well. The article is written by Brian Merchant. His Substack is really good. I got to call it up now. Sorry, I didn't have this ready for you. It's called Blood in the Machine. Brian's a journalist. He takes no prisoners, and he writes about AI and other technologies, but mostly from the perspective, I guess I would say, of workers and worker empowerment. So he's not, what you would call an enterprise beat writer per se, and may not be in a loop on everything that's happening in the enterprise around AI, but I look to some of these consumer AI critics to get a deeper perspective. So I want to talk to you a little bit about his most recent piece on the rage over using AI to automate the arts. In fact, I want to go through that piece pretty carefully today. So I'm going to do that. If you're watching, will you just comment so I know that you're here on LinkedIn? And yeah, I'm sorry about my Twitter peeps. Eventually, I'll get back to streaming on Twitter, but there seem to be some issues. So, what I wanted to talk about today was why I was wrong about generative AI and creativity on jobs, because this is an important story. I just wrote a monster blog post on Diginomica about generative AI project success in the enterprise and whether it's a realistic goal. And it's kind of a mid-year assessment. And I watched the sunrise writing this post. That's what it takes sometimes to get it done. And I'll give you just a very quick summary. You can check it out on Diginomica. But basically, I talked about a few key themes, including, that we really don't have a whole lot of customer use cases yet. What kinds of use cases are emerging? Some of the good work that vendors are doing around what I call their responsible AI architectures, because I really do want to give enterprise vendors credit when they get some of this stuff right. I think enterprise vendors done a good job of improving generative AI output. And so those responsible AI architectures have been an important focus of my work. But I also talk about how the financial markets are wising up, which gets a little bit back to this whole jobs issue and to what extent are jobs being taken by generative AI. And I generally agree with the Goldman Sachs take that AI, well, it's kind of a compilation of authors within that report, but basically there's one author in particular that writes about how AI is really about tasks right now more than complete jobs, because it kind of lacks a little bit of the problem solving dimensions and other capacities that involve like a pure job. So, I was kind of saying like that the job disruption is going to be more evolutionary, and I kind of still believe that, but especially with certain creative professions, it's a little bit different. Part of it is the impact on freelancers, because it's easy to a freelancer isn't really necessarily always doing a complete job. They're delivering on spec. So that's a little bit more like a task than a job in some ways. But also, some of these areas around, let's face it, AI can be pretty good at, um, you know, acceptable, suitable content on a certain level, as well as image generation and things like that. So translation services, image design services, not so much art as in like great art, but jobs around that. But one of the other things I really underestimated was, when I was saying like that the job impact wouldn't be as intense on creative professionals, part of what I was talking about there was my assumption that sort of enterprises would not take shortcuts around the technology and kind of put out substandard stuff. But I was wrong. I think a lot of enterprises are looking to cut corners with this technology, and I think that's a big theme in Brian Merchant's work as well, because I think he had a kind of similar view on tasks versus jobs, but I think he's been forced to rethink that a little bit. I think that's an interesting point, especially in the entertainment professions per se. So some of these themes are a little bit outside the enterprise context, but I will sort of tie them in a little bit. The other sort of theme was around like which are the really cool enterprise use cases and where are we getting traction, where are we seeing the best results. And I would say in that service and support assistance, that's one of the areas that's been the biggest focal point of Gen AI so far. That's another example where a lot of enterprises, I think, are cutting corners and either using chatbot technology that isn't as effective in terms of the architecture behind it and serving up crappy answers and bullshit that's making bad headlines, or just cutting corners. I've heard a lot of anecdotes back channel around like cutting out too many call centers and I've got to deal with these bots and I can't escalate to humans, which is really just more poor design and cost cutting than a reflection on the technology necessarily. So anyway, that's another area where I think I've been a little bit wrong and have to take my lumps, for saying, well, it's not mature enough to handle all these things. Well, if a company doesn't give a crap and wants to go ahead, then that kind of undermines my approach a little bit. So anyhow, along those lines, creativity is one of the themes I looked at in terms of the use cases that are emerging in the enterprise context. In the consumer context, I talk about how there isn't an enterprise killer app yet for Gen AI, but in the consumer side, there is. And the consumer side, the killer apps are mostly not so much what you would call like inspiring killer apps. It's more, although I think some of the killer apps, I talked a little bit around the relationship based ones. I think there's a few sites that are doing really quite well with bots around relationships, and you have a bot companion. Some of them are adult pornographic. Let's be clear, but some of them are not, and they're doing pretty well. And I think, I don't know if that's a killer app, but it is a successful business model. And then of course I talk about things like disinformation at scale and deepfakes being killer apps in the context of the consumer space. And I think that's where some of Brian Merchant's frustration around generative AI comes from, is he's looking a lot at the culture and consumer impact, where I think you've seen a lot of problematic designs, Brent. Lots of poor designs for this out there. Yeah, for sure, Brent. And one of the things I got into in the article was a little bit about, I did do a case study earlier about a company that did design a good service bot experience. And I actually did an interview with another vendor I'm going to be writing about that also did. So they are out there. If you want to check my post, it'll keep you reading a little bit this weekend. If you like, relaxed hobby reading on generative AI over the weekend, I'll pop the post in there. But it's you could do a search on Diginomica for John Reed and generative AI and projects, and you probably find it that way too. But I posted the link as well. So in that context, I kind of said, okay, I'm done with the creativity videos right now. I'm going to get my dental work done. But then this Brian Merchant article came out, and I really wanted to talk about it. Also, I did invite Liz Miller to pop on if she's around. I'm not sure if she is, because she was taking some victory laps on LinkedIn this week. Were pretty funny around Google's sort of semi-surprise decision to not banish third-party cookies after all. And Liz had some points around like "told you so." So I thought it'd be fun to have her on to take a victory lap. So we'll see if she is able to pop on or not. By the way, Brent, are you having the same experience with Twitter on the live stream? Because I had a lot of Twitter people watching my shows, and anyway, I'm fixing it now, I think, but it's Elon Musk is giving me a hard time. All right, so Brian Merchant. So I told you about his Substack, Blood in the Machine, and the post that he just put out So let me grab that post for you. The great and justified rage over using AI to automate the arts. So the post is basically a reflection upon a couple of things, a couple of pieces that Brian Merchant wrote. Long stories in Wired. One is about a guy who built a search engine for uncovering privacy violations on the web, which is pretty cool. And the other is about the impact AI is having on the video games industry. Namely, certain studios like Activision, which makes Call of Duty games, are embracing it and replacing human work with the AI generated variety. I heard from Liz Miller on the back channel, so let me get with Liz. Just one sec. Sorry about the real-time disruption, but we are live. Brent, what did you have to say here? OpenAI Search GPT gave Google the courage to backtrack. Yeah. They found their courage. Isn't it funny how that works? Let's see what Liz has to say. She's going to come on. Okay. Cool. I'll send you back in link. All right. Looks like Liz Miller might be able to pop on and take her victory lap. So hold tight, and we will get Liz involved here. Maybe a few minutes. I think she's still getting herself situated. So in the meantime, I'm going to proceed with this deconstruction of Brian's, and then I'll take a break from that for Liz in a sec. But so Brian wrote these two posts, and this impact of AI on the gaming industry is an interesting one. And what he said was that the piece on AI and gaming is blown up, that speaks to where our anxieties in tech lie at the moment. There was a time 10 years ago where this wasn't as much of an issue, but it's clear that people are fretting over AI, especially its threat to jobs, identity, and security. And in the wake of his video games piece, he says he's heard from so many artists, translators, artists, voice actors, animators, illustrators reaching out. Their bosses want to use AI too, and it's happening to them. It struck a nerve, right? And so he sat down to kind of figure out why that's happening right now, and why it feels more like an existential threat than it has in the past. So he says, as a studio in gaming, AI and gaming piece revealed, studios and bosses very much are using AI to cut corners, shrink departments, and replace workers with AI services by hiring workers familiar with AI programs to churn out more stuff faster. It's very much an open question whether or not these changes will be permanent or permanently used as leverage against workers, or whether they'll pass in the wind after the AI systems fail to improve to a point that studios find their output satisfactory, and they may turn out to be more trouble and expense than they're worth. I think that's really interesting, because what it tells you is that right now, like, we're at this crux where we don't really know exactly how the creativity piece is going to pan out. And the reason for that, Liz is just getting set up backstage, so she's about to join. So I'll just finish my thought here in a sec. The reason that we're facing this sort of crossroads is because there's a lot of factors we don't totally know yet. We don't know, for example, how much mediocre stuff people are going to find acceptable, and in what context can you get away with mediocre stuff. Like for example, Diginomica uses stock photo images on our posts. They're not exactly beautiful images, right? So, but when it comes to art and entertainment, that's really interesting concept, right? How much mediocrity are we gonna be able to handle in our lives? I think that's one of the questions. And then, to what extent is this really going to save time and money? To what extent are you going to be able to really get rid of your freelance professionals? Anyway, Brian's article is all about that, and I wanted to hit on it because it's directly relevant to the shows I've been doing. And Liz is about to come on. Okay, yeah, Elon's gonna make me pay a premium to live stream to X. Yep, I'm working on it. I'm gonna have to pay him as like ransom, I think. LA Liz says Brent, and with that,
I'll take it.
LA
I'll take it.
Liz.
I'll
LA
take it. I got
Liz,
my
what up?
yeah. What up, brother?
What up? What's going on in LA?
Oh, well, I'm not in LA today. I'm actually
Okay.
in Seattle today. Constellation had our annual summer solstice all hands retreat where
Nice.
some city is foolish enough to allow all of us to gather in one place. I mean, who does that?
I
Who
saw
didn't
these
send a
like
warning?
I saw these group hug type pictures come out. You guys are like feeling like really tight as a unit right now. That's very chummy.
You know what we have? We're like, when you get together at Thanksgiving with your dysfunctional family and you just take that selfie because
Yeah.
everyone needs it for Christmas. That's us. We're like this. We are this really funny, wonderfully dysfunctional yet totally cohesive family. Like I look at my fellow
Yeah.
analysts at Constellation. Like, listen, John, you know this about me. Like, if someone were to come out and try to like smack talk Holger Mueller, like Doug Henshin, it's going down. Like, I'm going to fight you.
Oh yeah,
There's probably going to be
absolutely.
some throat punching.
No
Like you
doubt.
don't go after my brothers. Like you don't do that. But
No
when
doubt.
we're together, Holger and I like bicker. And we bicker. Like the jacket, Brent Leary.
Brent wants the
Come on
jacket.
now. We I did get a new
Wardrobe.
I did get a new fleece jacket.
Oh, you got
So
the
I now have
fleece.
two. Oh yeah, I go with the fleece with the logo on the back, but then I also do like purple clothing. So I keep telling Ray that I keep it
Oh,
on
nice.
brand. Like I'll wear a purple blazer or like I get like purple sassy tennis shoes. So like I'm there to rep Constellation. I just can't do that jacket.
Yeah, yeah. You don't like
Yeah,
that. You don't like that. Oh, I just got back from the back nine kind of vibe.
yeah,
Come
yeah,
on.
yeah. It's totally me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
er,
Ray saves a lot on dry cleaning with that jacket.
he
So
super
I think
saves a
that's
lot on dry cleaning.
one of his secrets for like
It's
financial success as an
It's totally
analyst.
it's very
Yep.
reminiscent of like when I realized like there was a point in like the 10th grade when all the other girls were complaining about that we had to wear a uniform. And
Right.
I hit a point where I was like, no, it's pretty great. I just roll out of bed, gray skirt, white shirt, blue sweater. Like it was, you didn't think about it. There was no planning. It's just out the door. And that has kind of been the hallmark of my life, John.
Indeed. Well, speaking briefly of Constellation's been
Yes.
putting me through the ringer lately. I
Why?
I did a whole data to decisions use case review, which is super interesting for the
Yep.
Supernova Awards. So that's
Nice.
always fascinating, actually. So
Supernova
yeah,
Awards. That's right.
yeah,
Judging, first round of judging is just
yeah, yeah,
over.
yeah,
And
yep.
now we're going to turn it over to the public. I'm super stoked about it, actually. Like, I look at my categories, and I know that Paul Greenberg very well might disagree with me because I will tell you for anyone brave enough to submit in our next gen customer experience category, you're going up against Paul, right? And
Oh
Paul
yeah.
wants detail. He
Oh,
wants metrics.
he's not
He
messing
wants a
about.
true story. He wants to
Yeah,
see how
yeah.
you're causing all of CX. And then, like, these poor people are like, I did one thing over here in sales with my CRM. And he's like, no, like, he just like they had jettisoned immediately. Like,
Yeah. Well, I'm grouchy like that too. I thought it was really interesting in our category how, and this is my opinion as a judge, so
yeah.
it might be different for others, but I didn't think the Gen AI ones were all that good, and there was a real
On that
struggle.
data, yeah.
To quantify
Get that?
the value of it. Whereas
Oh, yeah.
some of the other analytics stories and the analytics and automation and insight stories were really good because they tied directly to numbers, ROI, things like that, and even like other
Totally.
AI type stories like predictive maintenance. And that's not a surprise, right? I mean, that's what happens when you have
Yeah.
more immature technologies. But it's really interesting to get the use case perspective on that, right? And really
Yeah.
look at
Oh, totally.
this is what's happening right now. And it wasn't like the Gen AI stories weren't interesting because some of them were. A lot
Yeah.
in the analytics side, it had to do with like the way in which some of these tools can bring, and I think it's true in your CX side as well, is like bringing this to more users in a more accessible way. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's definitely cool. It was just that it's a little hard to quantify exactly what that means in the short term. So
Totally. Totally. I think that what I loved about So I have two categories. I've got marketing transformation and I've got a next generation customer experience. And looking at all of those, any of the ones that had or involved Gen AI as the kind of crux of their transformative moment, the ones I thought were the best were the ones that actually were like, we thought we were going to start someplace small. Like,
Mm.
there was one submission. Since it's going into public voting, I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but you'll see it when the public vote comes out on Monday. Actually, there was one example in the marketing category where this rather large company has completely transformed their marketing operations when it comes to their creative output because they've applied Gen AI to not do the big ideas, right? Like that's still where the creatives are. Like I was listening to you before I
Yeah,
jumped
yeah.
on, right? That's where the creatives are still hyper super creative, right? What they got rid of was the let me do it in 19 shades of our brand color. Right. So they brought it all in one place. So now it's not just marketing that gets all of the love of all of this amazing creative work that these folks are doing. But you can be in service, you can be in sales, you could be anywhere in the org, including field, different geos,
Right.
and you can pull an asset, personalize that asset for your geographic location, right? And then deploy it where it used to take what, like a month? Because you had to put in the request, you had to make sure they got the right image, it went back and forth with the agency. So there all of a sudden you are weeks and a couple $100 later because you wanted a different picture.
You hit on something that was like the crux of the last show I did with Barb Mosher Zink on this, where she wrote about
Oh yeah.
generative AI marketing. And what I wanted to get in with her was exactly this point, which is like, it's not that there's no use cases around quote unquote creativity, but it just feels like the really exciting stuff is freeing up people's time, right? By doing all the
Right.
mechanistic crap that buries marketers and campaign
Oh, totally.
management and, translating shit to different regions and all this
Yeah.
stuff, right? And to some extent personalizing content distribution, things like, and I
Yeah.
just frustrates me a little bit because why do people always have to like, it feels like they have to get in a room by themselves with warm butter and say, Jen AI wrote this blog post for me. I'm like, for fuck's sake,
No,
write
no,
your own blog post and
right.
let
You
Gen
can write.
AI translate it into 20 languages for you and all that
Right.
other stuff, you know?
Like
Anyway,
there is a massive use case for it. But it's funny because I think people like we want to have this muscle memory of like the warm luxury of someone else doing something for us, I guess. Like I don't know, we like all revert to childhood and we want mom to come help us. And I think that's kind of like the weird knee-jerk reaction we all have for
right,
Gen AI. But
right.
I think the most incredible use cases that I've seen with Gen AI specifically, and I tend to split it into like what I've seen with text-based stuff and then what I've seen with like image and asset-based stuff. The text-based stuff is about the churn, right?
Yep.
It's about the I wrote something that I want to get on paper and I want to expand on it, right? Or I have an idea. I don't know, like I get writer's block all the time. I'm not like you. Like I can't do the like let me write brilliance all the time. I'm like I have a thumb. I get stuck. And so sometimes I'll go in and I'll use a Gen AI tool and be like, okay, I kind of want to write about this. It will give me a paragraph, and the minute I see it, I'm like, okay, well, that sucks. Let me write it my way. Like, let me write it away. So
Right.
I have found a way to use it for me, but I don't use it to write my stuff, right? On the image and the asset side, some of the most incredible use cases I have seen have been truly talented, amazing graphic artists, creators, both visual arts, like you name it, in that space of creativity. Skip the part where you have to have pain after a sketch. Like they'll sketch something out and kind of have an idea in their head of what they want to do. And instead of all the pain of the 90 million steps to iterate from that sketch, they apply a Gen AI on that and they get like, here are your first six options. How do you want to refine from here? Does that take away from the creative for having the brilliant idea to begin with? No. Does that take away from the fact that
Right.
they were able to sketch something that I could never do? No. It
So,
just
right.
got it skipped the like the
Right.
icky messy middle, right?
So I'm in an enterprise context, a lot of this makes sense to me. And there's this thing around like, if you're going to empower an individual to like use these tools in a way that
Yeah.
helps them to create better and more cool stuff, then you're going to hear no arguments from me. but I want to read you, since we're talking about this. I want to get to Google and
Yeah.
cookies in a
Oh yeah.
sec, but I want to read you this thing from Brian Merchant's piece, because I think Brian's hitting something that's definitely much more like of a broader cultural issue than an enterprise issue. But
Nice.
I think what he wrote here is, and this came back to this thing where he broke a story in Wired around Activision and some other companies basically like been laying off a lot of creators under the table under the
Yeah.
and basically trying to use automation. And Brian says, the pitch of automation has historically been that it will do the dangerous, dirty, and dull jobs so that we humans can focus on the stuff that allows for humans flourishing. So why are we here watching concept artists lose their jobs to software trained on previous artists' work, auto-generating output at the press of a button? Why are we automating the job of translators who have a unique knowledge of their language and culture and who can artfully translate works in a new medium? Why do we want to live in a world where instead of the actual voice actor, we have AI voice actors synthesized into a mush from all those that came before? Why do we want machines to do this stuff, the good stuff, the stuff that gives human life human value? The answer is we don't. Almost no one does except for dead-eyed corporate executives, opportunistic founders, and tech trend boosters, and those who have an antipathy for the creative arts for whatever reason. Anyway, I think it's really interesting because some of what he's howling about. Well, first of all, I'm very sympathetic to his howl because there's a lot of people's livelihoods getting affected by this in various ways. But part of the howl, I think, is the inevitability of like how tech disrupts, and I get that, and I don't think there's a whole lot. But I just think it's interesting because I just think this conversation around creativity would go a lot better if the conversation were being led by the people working with these tools. And it feels a lot of times the reason why there's so much disconnect is it feels like the conversation is being brought out by OpenAI and Google and how far they can push the envelope with these tools, whether or not the training sets that were used were ever compensated for from those that were trained. So I think it's a really interesting thing. And that was one of the things I wanted to get into in this broader series that I did, was sort of this contrast between like, yes, it's incredibly useful in a jobs context, but there's also this bigger cultural impact. And I don't know where it's all going to lead. And actually, that was what was great about Brian's piece, is though, even though he went on that rant, he's basically saying, I don't know where this is going either. I don't know. Like, and I think one of the key points there is that we all need to have a voice in this and help shape where it goes, instead of just saying, well, let's passively accept this state of affairs.
Let me wait and see.
So
and I
that's
think
what I want to do.
If you broaden the aperture from what Brian's talking about of kind of like the creative arts, I mean, look at what happened when like the web first came out. Like we were like, oh, we're never going to have to talk to another human being again because we're just going to use the web. I'm never going to have to ask a human a question because I have search. Right? Like we go through these phases where we seem to think everything's going to like. I mean, listen, instant coffee didn't kill coffee. Still got it, right? Like it's just the reality of like what happened, right? And I think that people are like, oh, paper's going to die. No one's going to print something on paper. Like.
Well, my hope, the coffee analogy is a really good one. And my hope is that both in enterprise and non-enterprise context, people are still going to want the fine coffee equivalent of that, whether it's art or music or, in my case, Diginomica. Because if people don't give a shit about that, then there won't be Diginomica 5 or 10 years from now.
And people want to have that variety. Like they get tired. But here's the interesting thing. And it's something that I've noticed because of the current political cycle and the election year that we're on. And this is not a political statement. What I've noticed is people saying things, like just kind of casually saying things like, that better not have been written by OpenAI. I want to actually hear what candidate A has to say. Or that sounded like AI. I want to hear candidate B say it out loud. Like there is this sense today that people are very carefully parsing authenticity. They're very carefully parsing kind of what they see and what they believe. Not everyone. There's still a lot of people that'll fall for everything. We all know that. But I think that this idea of voices and voices that people want to be heard is definitely something that we're going to see a greater drumbeat come out around. And I mean, hey, that's absolutely true. Diginomica, right? Like I could go to a news aggregator that probably could just spit out 19 headlines, or I could come to you and actually hear someone's opinion that goes, and the analysis of that goes along with the headline. And I think that's the difference, is people are starting to nuance what they want to ingest and how they want to interpret it. they want AI, they're going to go find AI. They know 90 sources that are going to use it, right? When they want a voice, they're going to go there. It's just like with the phone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
I
it's a
think
fun, it's a fun
it's
time.
going to be very interesting to see where it all lands. That's for sure.
Hmm.
I'm hoping there's people that give a shit about this stuff and want to, I mean, what I keep trying to say is like, if you don't like, okay, so if you don't give a shit on the consumer side about having accurate information or not, there's a decent chance you're already dead because of COVID and stuff like that.
Probably.
But on
Who
the
knows?
on the enterprise side, if you don't give a crap, the result is going to be bad projects and bad outcomes for your customers.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of the whole thing that I'm hoping will keep the kind of stuff that I do, and to some extent what you do alive, is that sense
Oh,
of like
totally.
that we need better information so we can have better products and serve our
Oh,
customers
yeah.
better. So
Oh, without a
that's
doubt.
my hope,
Without a
because I
doubt.
don't think the kind of information you describe, that convenient, like whatever machine generated crap, that's not going to bring your project over the finish line. It's
No,
just not. Now
no.
Brent's made a really interesting point here. Sometimes we need Gen AI created filters to help shield us from all the great Gen AI created content. And that was the other thing
Yeah.
I've been asking marketers is, okay, you feel really great about generating 50 posts with Chat GPT this weekend. Well, everyone else did the same thing. Like, at what point is there diminishing
And guess
returns?
what trained
So,
your posts?
right.
It's like that weird thing,
Yeah.
and I always get
Who's
so
going to read
confused
all that
during
crap is
like
what I'm wondering. Like,
right. I get really confused during briefings when people like with this like huge amount of pride are like, all of our emails were written by Gen AI
yeah,
and we plugged it into OpenAI. I'm like, yes, you and 70 other brands that do the exact same thing that you do, where
right,
all of the emails were trained on the same emails.
right.
So awesome. Like we are always, I think in marketing, we're constantly battling the sea of sameness. And we've always been battling the sea of sameness. It just comes in
Yeah.
faster, different, more bland versions. And this is the latest one. And I think where I'm seeing the glory of the Gen X marketer right now is that we're now the CMOs, right? We're now
Indeed.
going into that spot and we're like, no, I'm going to tell you exactly where I want to see that Gen AI work in. Like, yes, I want to see you churn 90 different emails about thank you so much for resetting your password. Now let's talk about what's happening next with your account. Like, churn those all day, but don't you dare, don't you
Right.
dare. Like so I think that we've seen so many waves of where all of this digital transformation around content has taken us over the past 30 years. That I think it's kind of our moment to shine. At least I'm hoping it is, because we got all these kids that are like, well, I just have to have Gen AI write my resume, do all of my email posts. Meanwhile, they're all spending their like with all that time they saved, they're on TikTok watching original content that was
Right.
not created by Gen AI. Like it splits my brain in half. Like I don't
Right.
understand how that all comes together. But I do think it is that time where I love Brent's comment because I think that the filter that we're going to have to figure out is someone kind of just standing up in the middle of the sea of sameness being like, this is bullshit. And then maybe we start to chip away from it because there is an absolute valuable, critical, money saving, money making place for Gen AI in enterprise. Full stop, big old period.
Sure.
It might not be where we're applying it right now when we're still in the
Indeed.
sandbox experimentation phase. But the warning label on all of this is that experimentation phase is going to be done in like 6 months. We don't have 2 years to luxuriate
Right.
over what to do with social media, right? Like it's going to be done by this time next year. We'll have figured it out. The winners will have risen to the top. But I think it's super fun. And if you haven't gone and played with any of these, like you were saying before, like you're all on stock imagery. I've gone the complete opposite way, John. I go on to things like Firefly, and
Right.
for all of my presentations, I have now gone, and Brent, this is just for you. This is just for you, Brent Larry. I pick a different varmint to put in my presentations. And
Right.
I have Firefly put them in weird situations. Like the time I had a hamster running up a growth and margin chart on a spreadsheet, jumping over piles of money.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I mean, the way the web works, we have to have images on our
Totally.
articles. If we use Gen AI for that, and we have took a position we're not using Gen AI in any of our writing, and that's like been established.
Love it.
But we will use it for images if we want to. But I don't think it's going to really honestly be much better than the stock photos. And what it will
No, I
be,
don't.
what it will be though, at some points is more unique, right? So like if
Right.
I really want, like you said, if I want like 5 gerbils like chasing a
Yes.
executive down the street,
Yes.
I can get that, right? Whereas if I go on to like, Adobe or whatever, I'm probably not going to find 5 gerbils chasing an executive. I'm going to have
No,
to settle
you're not.
for like,
You can join me
for
in
like,
this varmint parade,
yeah, a
and we
rabbit or
can
something.
just do this to Brent. Like we can do this, John. It could
Does
be
Brent
the
have
bro
some
hug.
kind of like, does Brent have
He's
some
got a
kind of
varmint
a,
issue. He has a varmint issue, and it's
does he?
fine. It's fine. It's fine. But I'm
Brent,
just
wow, I
saying,
didn't know
we
about
call
that.
it
Wow.
we call it the Brohammer Varmint Collection, and we're
Ah.
off to the races with this. I mean, there's nothing that can stop us at this point.
Wow, Brent, I had no idea, man. We're gonna have
It's
to
a
get
Friday
we're
on
gonna have to
feisty.
get into
What can I
that.
say?
All right, you ready? You ready for your
Let's do it. I'm
victory
ready.
lap?
I've stretched.
Okay.
I've stretched. I'm ready to roll.
Okay, so Google makes the semi-surprising decision to not ban third-party cookies. Not surprising to Liz Miller, though. So you took some victory laps on LinkedIn, which I thought was appropriate. But what was going on there? Tell us about that.
So, about 4.5 years ago, I want to say it was probably about that time. It was really one of the first indications where, Google comes out with this blog post. And it was a very strongly worded blog post for Google saying, we are committing to privacy. We are not going to be left behind in this privacy move forward. And we're going to commit to eliminating and deprecating the third-party cookie across Google products, especially across Chrome. We are going to create a different, better, more secure, and more privacy aware, more consumer in control option for everyone. And within months, all of a sudden that confidence and that tone started to crumble. And it was pretty easy to see that when the first time they said, well, we were aiming for 2022, maybe 2023, we're hoping, you could kind of see that Google had realized something really important, that getting rid of the third-party cookie involved more than just an agreement between Google and the consumer, that it involved
So did
Google's
you always kind of
business
think,
and the advertiser.
did you always think it was kind of bullshit, or did you
Yeah.
think, oh, it's just going to take a long time, or did you think, oh, it's just...
No, I did not see a viable way for this to move forward for Google's business. I just
Okay.
didn't.
And why is that?
Because the vast majority of Google's business is based on not only advertising and advertisers, but those organizations that drop third-party cookies to be able to help their advertisers do more business on Google. So this wasn't about Google's direct relationship with the advertiser. It was about the ecosystem that Google had built around advertising that allowed advertisers to use these third parties, drop in these third-party cookies to continue to advance their own quest to try to be better at understanding and knowing and reaching their customer. Now, the irony here is the third-party cookie did very little to actually do that. It made advertising more precise. It made our targeting better. It made our optimization strategies better, our spend better. So operationally, it had a big impact in the advertising world. But did it really help us know our customer any better? No, not really. That's why you saw that pivot, right? The cookie's going to crumble. Hey, everyone, you need to go collect your first party data, right? It was almost like the immediate boomerang effect.
So I actually, the one thing I liked about all this disruption was I liked companies having to think a lot harder about first party data.
Amen.
Because I felt like, and it seems like in the era of AI, quote unquote, this whole element of trust is actually becoming more important. So are we at risk of kind of losing a little bit of momentum around that, or are people
losing momentum? No, I don't think we're going to lose momentum. Because I think that we had already started losing momentum on that because we had matured a lot of our first party data stores. And I think we have really, as marketers and as brands,
and GDPR help with that too, right?
GDPR, CCPRA, all of that. I think all of the regulatory shifts have really helped that. Yeah, the whole cohort, like we're going to anonymize this data so you have a cohort. No one wanted that. Everyone's like, we're good, thanks. Much. No one wanted to buy into that. And I think that now, 2 days ago, you have the FTC releasing guidelines and releasing a very strongly worded piece around anonymized data, that hashtagging and you just saying something is anonymous does not make data anonymous. If it can be tied back to the consumer, it is still like if it can be tied back to an individual in any way, shape, or form, that is not anonymous data. We now have an environment that recognizes where all the gray areas and where all the loopholes and where we've been hiding, and where mediocre to bad actors have been hiding. But I think that with this whole panic around the cookie crumbling gave marketing and gave IT an opportunity to sit down with one another and say, okay, I'm going to lose all of this operational stuff. My ad agency's in a panic. I'm freaking out because I think we're totally reliant on cookies. And I'm a manufacturer of a CPG. I don't have a direct relationship with my customer. The store that they buy my product does. What do I do? And that's where the innovation started, right? Like, okay, now look, how do we collect data, on our websites? How do we ask our customers for their preferences? How do we start to ask and collect? How do we enhance profiles? Do we create loyalty clubs? They started to think about this stuff. Just as we started to get that momentum going, someone decided to come out with that ridiculous phrase, zero-party data, where I understand that some people understand zero-party data to be foundational, ergo, like it's 0 day, 0 ground. This is the backbone of everything, because zero-party data is that data that the consumer voluntarily gives you. But you know what? The rest of the market and the rest of industry heard zero-party doesn't belong to anyone. It's zero-party data. It's up for grabs. I can take it and I can do whatever I want with it. I'm sorry. Like, no, that's not what was meant to happen. So we already started to see some bad behaviors coming out. We already started to see, the reality was we started to see people make a distinction between privacy and safety, which are two completely different things, right? Digital privacy and digital safety, completely different. Maybe related, sometimes within the same strategy, but different. So when we started to think about third-party cookies and wanting to protect privacy, Google realized they couldn't do that. The best they could do was get security, right? They could ensure that people were not going to do nefarious things, that they were going to respect the identity, they were going to respect the consent, they were going to respect the intention of the consumer. I think that's where Google's going to focus, and rightly so. I hope that this is the moment where marketers stand up and say, we're going to do the same thing, right? We are going to respect the difference. We are going to strive for privacy, which inherently means actually aggregating less data and trying to do more based on what the customer is inviting us to do, asking us to do, as opposed to all the other machinations around data. And really focusing on the safety of what we are providing our customers and our users, right? That we are not doing inappropriate, we're not doing all the shady things. We're not training things and pretending that the data that went on our phones wasn't there. There's so many cases right now. The Patagonia case, mind blowing. I don't know if you've seen that. It's like the Patagonia lawsuit is insane because everyone should be terrified right now. Anyone who has taken data on a vendor, like any vendor who's taken data that's gone across their cloud and gone across their system and called it their data and used that to train their AI, go look up that Patagonia case. See how far you're going to get with that. Assume that your lawsuit is coming next, right? So we're entering this really interesting time when it comes to where regulators, where vendors, where organizations, and where the public are going to start making maybe some different conversations around what's happening with all this data. And could we revert to bad behavior? 100%. Do I envision the entire DMP and programmatic marketplace charging back into life after all this time? Probably not. There's still going to be a space for it, but not as big.
So Brent makes a really interesting point. Privacy still ranks way lower on the importance spectrum than convenience does to consumers. And Brent, I think that's a really important point, and I think a lot of that obviously is also like culturally specific. And just focusing on the U.S. audience, I find a shocking amount of indifference overall, where people have really opted for convenience over privacy. And I would include myself firmly in that camp, like whether it's the GPS type stuff of my phone knows more about me than my mother does, or the fact that I have these Amazon devices all over my house that listen to all
Right.
kinds of stuff all the time. And and so I've made those. I think what's interesting though, Brent, is I've made some really conscious choices around that for myself. And I think where I think brands get into trouble, and let's see what Liz thinks, is where a lot of times there's a lack of transparency. So even if I know that you're doing stuff, take Facebook for example, how they got into trouble when some guy's online and he sees his wife featured in like a hot singles in your area thing, and that's within the scope of the terms of
Yeah.
service to use your picture like that, but you didn't realize that because you didn't read the 20-page terms of service and understand the fine print of
Yeah.
what that meant. So I still think brands, even though we don't care that much about privacy, I still think brands are going to get punished and embarrassed by abuse.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was today years old when I learned that X auto sets something, their inferred identity setting. They auto set it when they introduced it to on. You got to go into your settings and turn it off. And inferred identity for X, formerly known as Twitter, however we're still calling that, is that inferred identity is based on not only the signals and cues that X can scrape from a device that has logged into X, but it can also pull that type of data, pull all of that inferred identity data from devices or phone numbers or email addresses that you haven't used to log on, but that may appear to be connected to you. I'm sorry, what? Like what? Like what are you doing? Like, oh, but we do it to serve you more personalized advertising.
Right.
Trust me when I tell you that nothing on X is personalized to any of my preferences. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it is a wild west over there
Despite
right
the
now.
fact that it's taking liberties on,
Holy
non-transparent
mother
liberty.
of, right? And so you've got to go in, and I think that when people are confronted with moments like that, because let me tell you that the Xaverse, the Twitterverse is a buzz with this today because people have started to figure out that also their training of AI, their humorous AI assistant Grok, your data auto set to yes, go ahead and train everything from Twitter on that. So it's things like that that are starting to come into the public consciousness where they're like, whoa, maybe not. Like maybe I don't
The
want that.
irony of all that is Grok's a piece of shit.
Oh, it's garbage.
During the CrowdStrike thing, Grok published this thing around like, oh, all these engineers are so excited about working for CrowdStrike that all the tweets were satirical.
It's so bad. It's so bad, right?
Hey,
But
hey,
I
hey,
think
hey, Clive, just a heads up. We're not going to do manufacturing today, so just FYI, you can keep commenting on it. But my special guest Liz is doing a victory lap. We're talking privacy and cookies. In fact, Liz, it's time for
Clive,
your. I think it's time for your applause. You call,
you,
of course, I'm giving you credit for having called it all these years ago.
yeah, thank you.
So what did you tell your clients and brands like after the initial prove this to us? What did you tell them
Yeah,
after the initial ruling? What was your advice then? Did you say just don't take it too seriously, but start looking at first party data just because it's a good idea anyway?
yeah.
Or
No, my initial statement was to pretty much anyone I worked with was you should already be worried and focused on first party data and building those
right,
relationships and building those data stores and profiles for your customer with rich permission based handed over freely data because you're going to always be able to do more with that than you'll ever be able to do with a third party cookie.
right,
It's one thing to be able to target someone. That's nice. It's another thing to be able to say, hey, John, I get that you really like dry erase pens. Let's talk. Right?
right,
Two completely different conversations than to just send you a whole lot of advertising about pens, as opposed to me sending you something that's like, hey, John, have you ever thought about using a purple dry erase pen on that
right,
sassy dry erase board of yours? Right? Like we have gotten to that point of sophistication. So the conversation has always been about you need to be having conversations with your CIO, your CDO, whoever is in the ecosystem of people who are charged with enhancing, creating, securing your data infrastructure to figure out what you can start to build to be that customer data infrastructure, whether it's on a CDP, whether it's in your data garden reservoir, whatchamahoo's it, whatever, fine. Let's start having those conversations. I think the brands who leaned into that, even the CPG, even the manufacturing brands that leaned into that, they look at this news of like, never mind, we've canceled the cookie apocalypse as saying, oh, cool. So now we can go back to saving a little money and maybe being more precise on our advertising, but we're going to keep focus over here. And
Right.
that's probably all of my emails, all of my texts of clients after the announcement came out was don't lose focus. The
Right.
focus isn't on the ad, and the focus should have never been on the cookie. The focus
Right.
still has to be on your customer.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of GDPR, where the best brands were already
Yes,
mostly compliant in the first place. So
exactly.
maybe a little fine tuning, but more of a
Spot on.
gut check on your strategy than anything. So
Spot on.
why would Google do this in the first place? Like, what did they
Best of
think?
intentions.
Did they think at the time that privacy would also give them? I mean, obviously, we'll give them a little bit of good intentions, but was there
Yeah.
also some competitive advantage there? Because one of the things that came out that Brent theorized is that because he said right before you joined that OpenAI announcing their own search engine is an interesting coincidence in terms of the timing of this.
Yeah.
It sort of makes me wonder, like, did Google like have a better competitive environment back then where they could dictate more of the terms of things and now they don't? Or what do you think accounts
Well,
for that?
the OpenAI thing I think is super interesting. I don't think it's going to be an immediate threat to Google.
Nor do I.
Mainly because it's search when it comes to how AI is and where the AI movement is going to be. Sure, OpenAI and Google are going to battle that out, and my model's better, and blah 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 blah. Fine. Um, but when it comes to search and advertising, Google still got the corner on that. Like they are the dominant force in the market. I
Yeah.
mean, OpenAI can introduce their, they can go against DuckDuckGo. Best of luck to you going up against Bing. But like this is not, like you're not quite chasing the big elephant yet. I think that
Right.
where a lot of this comes from is the fact that all of the alternatives that Google had tried to really put into the market and really tried to make stick did not satisfy regulators. It didn't satisfy consumers, and it sure as heck didn't satisfy advertisers.
Right.
And if you couldn't satisfy the two most important in that being, well, your advertisers and your regulators, screw the consumer, you weren't going to go anywhere.
Right.
Right. And I think that's really where we landed. And, yeah, I give Google I do actually give them a lot of credit for taking the hit and being transparent on it and trying and really coming back at the very end and being like, hey, advertisers, we know we kind of, we thought we were going to get you a better alternative, but it was going to cost more and do less. Sorry.
Brent says, yeah, and that's why Google didn't want to fight with one hand tied behind their back. Interesting theory, Brent. By the way, Brent, I sent you a back end login if you want to hop in and say hi before we wrap. We're going to wrap in a few. I know you usually have a show pending, though, so you may usually
maybe
you have fisticuffs with John. So, but
and Clive,
if you
don't
want to
talk
pop
about
on,
K-pop being on. No, Clive, I'm stopping you right there.
You're going to get him with Clive here. Oh, here we go.
Clive, don't start don't start encouraging K-pop with Gen AI. I need my Blackpink to be authentic. No. I'm gonna set my 7-year-old on you, Clive.
You're drawing the line there, huh?
Yeah. My line is clearly K-pop. It might be T-Swift too, but right now it's K-pop.
Yeah, well,
although the picture of the pigeons that looked like they were on a new like NWA album cover, I can't decide whether it was an actual picture of pigeons or like an AI created image of pigeons. And so
Brent Leary, what's
up, Atlanta, Brent?
The varmints again, Liz. Really? They don't have varmints in Seattle. Come on.
But they have them in AI, Brent, and that's what's important.
Yeah, the AI varmints. Anyway, now this is a great conversation. And Liz, the victory lap. Very nice.
Absolutely.
It's when I say crazy things and everyone looks at me crazy. That's when I figure someday I'm taking a lap on this. Like someday I'll take a lap on this one.
So Brent, you've been tracking CX for a long time, before it was called CX, before you even knew what that meant.
Damn, man.
So
you just want to call me old and just
hey, man, we're all a little grizzled here. So what is your reaction to all this?
What, the Google?
Yeah.
It's like I said, I think the original move was because Apple, you go back to, I think it was the May 24th, 2020 Apple update that changed all the policies and made it that you had to opt in to get all this, personalized experience stuff as opposed to opt out. That put a spotlight on privacy for the first time, and I don't know for how long. And I think remember Facebook made their little announcement, and after we got done laughing at it, then Google came out with all this stuff. And I think they kept on backtracking, like Liz was saying, is like, oh, we're gonna do it now. Oh no, it's gonna be a little later. And then they got to a point where they actually might have some competition with OpenAI. I mean, this is just me speculating. It's probably the announcement was probably well ahead of that, but it just feels like you got Microsoft working with OpenAI, and OpenAI has been gangbusters with ChatGPT, and then they announced this Search GPT thing. I'm like, Google's probably like, look, we can't afford to be Mr. Nice Guy and work with one hand tied behind our back anymore. So it's pure speculation on my part.
Interesting.
It's the bulk of their business. I mean, advertising. I get that we all love to luxuriate around Google Cloud conversations, and I'm not saying that we all shouldn't, but everyone's like, "Oh my God, Google Cloud's gonna be so powerful." It's the the itsy bitsy tech, 11% of their business. The rest of it
never threatens them.
Advertising, they are never going to let anything come and even get close to taking a percentage point away.
Like DuckDuckGo or Brave, they're nibbling, little nibbles.
I think altogether they're 2% of the market. Yeah. But you know what? They're perfect for the people they're perfect for.
Yeah.
And they should exist, right? They're great privacy aware search engines, and they're fantastic if you want to have all that and on, they're great.
But as you said, it's not going to threaten the mothership. No. But ChatGPT and Microsoft combination with what's going on with this search, I think, like I said, I'm just purely speculating. It makes sense that maybe now they feel a little bit of heat, the potential, the future of heat. And they're like, look, we don't need to be fighting one arm tied behind our backs anymore.
The one I'm waiting for, the smackdown, the little swat away that I'm waiting for is Microsoft. Because if you're Microsoft and you've been fighting all this time, right, you have been fighting, leaning in, Bing, we're not giving up on it. We're still moving forward. We're going to hold on to this. This is going to be our search engine. And Bing does, every once in a while, you see a little jump in Bing, and it steals a little bit away from Google, and we all get really excited in the search world. My God, Bing did it. They got another 0.5%. If I'm Microsoft, I'm looking over at those kids at OpenAI being like, I'm sorry, what'd you say? Did you because you're not going after Google's lunch.
You're taking a little piece of the Bing pie there.
You're taking a little too much from Bing, right?
You think maybe Satya got on the phone there, made a little tough love there?
But it was probably more a selfie,
hey, hello, Sam. You almost lost your frigging company, except for me. I got all the people that cared about ethics out of your company. You owe me a favor.
Ethics,
What are those? Can ChatGPT?
I don't know, man.
What are ethics, and do I need them?
A couple of months ago, or maybe it was a little longer on that. Remember, Perplexity all of a sudden started looking at how they can integrate ads into what they're doing. I mean, you can't get away from it. Look,
you can't get away from it. You gotta make money.
It's the golden goose.
To make money.
Our attention is, people would rather pay with their attention than with their money.
Yeah.
And so unless that changes, I don't see a lot of things changing. Yeah.
It's and the funny thing is you had said it earlier, privacy doesn't rank really high on that list of things we really have to fight for. But you know what does rank high? Don't be creepy. That consumers will rather say, I'm not going to give you my data. I'm not going to watch that thing. Even as much as I want that 10 minutes of free internet at the airport, I'm not going to watch that video because you're being creepy.
Right.
Ew, you gross me out.
Yeah, if you cross that line.
If you're not going to be creepy, I'm at the airport. Yeah, who cares about a firewall? But anyway, you're going to log on to that free internet. I have to find out if I'm a Carrie or if I'm a Samantha, right? Like I need to
Right.
understand that in my Sex and the City quiz. So I'm not going to read the fine print. I don't care what you do with all my data. Yes, see all of my Facebook friends. Here they are. I've served up.
I'm glad
a
you
whole group of
explained that because I
people.
had no idea who Carrier or the other person was you were talking
Sex and
about.
the
So
City. Sex and the City,
sorry.
brother. Come on.
Uh,
Come on. There are all these quizzes, you know, like when you go and take the quiz, like which Avenger are you? Like I have to find out, am I
God.
Thor? Like that you will go and take that quiz
Yeah,
because
and
you
on
are
that
dying to know.
and on that note, thanks Liz for clearing the way for me to move on from the Sex in the City talk, and I got to go and fight
Yeah,
the
you
cold
got
one, the bold one here.
you
So
got to go
Go. Have fun.
fight it out. Yeah, have fun, Brent. Thanks for chiming in.
Bye,
Catch you
this
later.
is a lot of fun,
Yeah, catch you later, man.
minus the varmints, but anyway.
Varmints,
Yeah, see you.
raccoons. Bye.
So, all right. Well, that was cool.
Yes, sir.
Nice to have a cameo from Brent. And
I love it.
yeah,
Well, thanks
and
for having me on, man.
yeah, so basically we
It
can
was
look forward
fun.
to being stalked all over the web by creepy
Yeah.
brands and awesome.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see all those creepy list vendors, like like all the bad actors are gonna come jumping
Yeah.
back to life. We're gonna see a lot of gold coins for sale.
Yeah.
Like I hope anyone who's ever lost hair in their life is ever going to enjoy seeing all of the hair loss. Think well, just imagine all the advertising that's on X right now. It's gonna go back to being everywhere, not just there.
So I think there's one quick thing when we wrap here, which is I think
Yeah.
that the interesting thing is that while I think you do make a really good point around X, that just because you have a lot of data on someone doesn't mean you're going to deliver a better experience to them. I think that's 100% true. But I do think that there are going to be some brands that do a really good job of
Yes.
taking your opt-in data and doing some useful stuff with it, right? And
Absolutely.
and that's where
Absolutely.
that's where the opportunity in all this BS lies, right? Is to
Yeah.
take it
100%.
to do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Not necessarily train your AI with it, though that's certainly a possibility and that can happen, but it's more about how that fits into the overall framework of how you identify
100%.
with customers and how you serve your customers, right? So that's
And
the
it's,
opportunity.
do you
Yep.
respect them or are you there to exploit them?
Right.
Right. And the companies that are going to lean into, I respect them and God, I want them to experience all this cool stuff that I see about my brand. And I'm going to co-create with them. Like this whole age we're walking into with AI is the opportunity for us to actually collaborate and co-create with our customers in real time in ways we have never been able to before. Brands from around the world can literally have any conversation they want to with any customer because of translation, because of all this information. Like it is cool as all get out, right? We can do that. And the more we do that with rich data where we can really have these relevant conversations, it's going to be awesome. But we're also going to have to all agree that when that annoying company that's just trying to slice through and make us buy more and do creepy things and do bad things, that the punishment is we don't do business with you. Like we walk with our wallet, see you later, peace out, bye. That's the only way you learn a lesson.
Indeed. Well, let's end on that note of semi-techno optimism because we don't get that on my show that often.
We don't.
But we
don't.
need the possibilities as well as the dystopia. So thank you for bringing both.
Of
And
course.
thanks. And if you can hang out backstage for just a sec, I have one thing to
Yeah,
ask you. And thanks all for joining and catch you next time. Bye-bye.